Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Paranoid Times. Tonight, we're going to talk about the lost. Gold, obsession, and the American nowhere. To set the scene, I want you to think that I'm telling you these stories around a campfire. A campfire that we're getting ready to go out and look for buried treasure, or someone beside us pulls out a map and on a quest to find something. In America, we have many stories of buried treasure, lost treasure, shipwrecks. Hold on one second. Hello, I'm back. I'm sorry. I had to take care of something. Um, but yeah, I want you. This is about lost American gold and treasures, and some of the weird stories that has surrounded it. Um, Hopefully, we won't have any interruptions. Tuck is not with us here tonight. I believe he is out of range. Hopefully, he'll be with us tomorrow. But anyway, we're going to start with the Dutchman's curse. Yes, you can call me Saturday. The quote goes, at least 6 people have been murdered in these mountains. That hasn't slowed anybody down. I want to start with a man named Albert, and some people called him Adolf Ruth. He was a 67-year-old, an amateur. He had a bad hip. I think I'm about there myself. He'd never done anything particularly dangerous in his life. But in the summer of 1931, he drove out to the Superstitious Mountains, east of Phoenix, Arizona, and he walked into them alone. And he never walked back out. 6 months later, they found his skeleton. Now, as a child, my grandma gave me this book on buried treasures and lost treasures in America. I was fascinated by them. This was one of the first stories that was in that book. I always wanted to go to the Superstitious Mines in Arizona. I followed every story that come out of there for the past 40 years. And this place is weird, bizarre, strange, and they never found what was in there. Let me continue. His skull was about a quarter mile from the rest of him. In the skull was 2 bullet holes, both fired at close range from a high-powered rifle. In his notepad, written in his own hand, was Vina Vida Vic. I came, I saw, I conquered. And below that, a note claiming he had found it, the mine, the Lost Dutchman's mine. His map was missing. Now, before I tell you what the Lost Dutchman's mine is, I need you to understand something about the Superstitious Mountains. They are not a metaphor. They are a real place, about 40 miles outside of Phoenix. You can drive there right now. People do. They go every weekend with metal detectors and GPS units and photocopies of maps they found on the internet at 2 in the morning, or maps they have bought from somebody there in the local town. The mountains are named the Superstitions because the Apache people who lived near them warned that earlier settlers do not go in there. They weren't being superstitious. They were being accurate. The mountains are a volcanic maze, box canyons, false trails, terrain that looks the same in every direction. People get lost in there on clear days and good weather. They fall. They get bitten by rattlesnakes. And some of them don't come back. And yet, 150 years, people keep going back. Greed. The legend starts with a German immigrant named Jacob Watts, the Dutchman, which is an old American slang that just meant the juice in German. Watts arrived in Arizona in the 1860s and spent years in the mountains. And then in 1891, he was dying. And on his deathbed in Phoenix, he told a woman named Julia Thomas, wow, what a last name, about a gold mine somewhere in the Superstitions, a vein so rich, he said, you could fill the saddlebags in an afternoon. He gave her some clues. They were vague, and then he died. Julia spent her life savings searching for it. So did the people she told. She did the people they told. So did the people she told. By the time Adolph Ruth came along in 1931, the Lost Dutchman's mine was already one of the most famous lost treasures in America. Ruth had obtained what he believed was an old Spanish map. He was convinced he had the answer everyone else missed. He was wrong or he was right. Someone didn't want him to be. Nobody knows which. The thing about the superstitious mountains, nobody knows which. After Ruth's murder, the treasure hunt entered a darker phase. In the 1950s and 60s, a flood of prospectors came out. Some of them disappeared. Some of them were found dead under circumstances that were called accidental, but didn't quite look like accidents. A man named James Carve was airlifted into the mountains by a helicopter in 1947 to search for the mine. They found his headless skeleton 2 years later. The local sheriff at the time started keeping account. He stopped counting at about a dozen. The official explanation is always the same. People underestimate the terrain. Some out of water, they fall. And that almost certainly true for most of them. But some of those deaths, the ones with bullet holes, the ones with missing heads, they are harder to explain away. There's a theory that the Apache people have always known where the mine is. They have always protected. There's another theory that a series of private landowners have been quietly eliminating treasure huntings who get too close. There's a third theory, the one serious historians hold, which is they never was a mine. Jacob was either delusional or running a very long con, and that everyone who ever died in those mountains died for nothing. I don't know which theory it is. I know that right now, tonight, there are people camped in the superstitious mountains looking for it. The thing about Adolf Ruth is that he left behind a son. The son who spent the rest of his life trying to prove his father was murdered. He never could. He died without answers. And there's something very American about that. Now, the next story is the Declaration of Buried Gold. The NSA has an official website dedicated to whether this treasure is real, and that should tell you everything. Here are the facts. I want to set with you for a moment. The National Security Agency, the NSA, the intelligent arm of the United States government, the peoples who built PRISM and can reportedly intercept most of the world's digital communications, has an official arm on their public website about a treasure hunt. Not a curiosity. It's a serious cryptographic problem. The page discusses whether 3 encoded ciphers from 1880s are genuine or fraudulent, and what modern code breaker techniques might reveal about them. And that's where we're going to start tonight. In 1885, a small pamphlet appeared in Virginia. 33 pages. It was called the Bell Papers. And it told the following story. In 1820, a man named Thomas J. Bell and a group of 30 companions were hunting buffalo somewhere near the Colorado-New Mexico border. And they stumbled onto a mountain vein of gold and silver unlike anything they had ever seen. They mined it for 2 seasons and hauled the ore back to Virginia, where they buried it somewhere in Bedford County. 2 wagon loads of gold, 1 silver plus jewels.
You made me cut it off.
All right, I'm on. All right. 1 silver plus jewels they'd acquired trading along the way. The total value at today's prices had been estimated at somewhere between 43 million and 65 million. Now, I was told, I don't live too far from Bedford. I was told that it was much higher than that. I apologize for the interruptions, guys. There's quite a bit of stuff going on in the house. Bell, before setting off on another expedition, entrusted a locked iron box to his hotel innkeeper named Robert Morris. He said, "If I don't come back in 10 years, open it." He never came back. Morris eventually opened the box and found 3 sheets of numbers, ciphers. Cipher 1 would reveal the exact location of the vault. Cipher 2 would describe its contents. Cipher 3 would identify the rightful heirs. Morris spent 20 years trying to crack them and failed. He eventually handed them to a friend who cracked one, Cipher 2, the contents, using the Declaration of Independence as a key. The numbers correspond to the words in the Declaration, and the first letter of each word spelled out its message. Then the pamphlets were published, and the world found out about it. That was 1885. Cipher 1 and Cipher 3 have not been solved since. Now, there are 2 camps on the Bell ciphers, and I give them both to you straight. Camp 1 says it's real. I'm with Camp 1, okay? But there are a lot of crazy people in Camp 1. The decoded cipher 2 is too internally consistent to be a hoax. The historical details Bell describes, the route, the time frame, the geography checks out. The ciphers themselves show signs of a genuine but imperfect encryption method. The gold is there, in the ground, in Bedford County, Virginia, and whoever cracks the remaining 2 ciphers will find it. Camp 2. They say it's an elaborate con in American history, a 19th century puzzle box designed to sell pamphlets and keep people distracted. The author of the pamphlet is anonymous. Thomas Bell himself left almost no historical traces outside of the ciphers. The 2 unsolved ciphers show statistical patterns that some analysts believe are too random, meaning they may be nonsense dressed up like a code. The NSA, however, for what it's worth, doesn't take a side. Their website says that the ciphers remain unsolved and represent a fascinating cryptographic challenge. So there's people at the NSA that are working on this. I have met people who have spent decades on this, retired engineers, history professors, a former military cryptographer who served in 3 conflicts and came home devoted the last 20 years of his life working on Cipher 1. He told me, I am 90% certain it's real. The other 10% keeps me humble. He had a wall in his office, the entire wall, floor to ceiling, covered with numbers from the ciphers in different arrangements, different attempted keys, color-coded by approach. His wife told me she had stopped looking at that wall 20 years ago. He told me that when he cracks it, not if, when, the first thing he'll do is call her. I didn't say what I was thinking. Which is, what if there's nothing to find? What if that was always the wall itself that mattered? What if the hunt is this thing, and the gold is just the excuse? He probably would have said the gold is still there. Don't romanticize my obsession. Fair enough. Now the next story is the poem that broke America. He hit it when he thought he was dying. He got better. And then he watched 350,000 people lose their mind. Now, I've spoke about this man before on my channel. I met him in an RV up in Montana. The person I'm talking about was Forrest Fenn. I want to tell you about a man named Forrest Fenn, and I want to be fair to him because I think he genuinely didn't know what he was unleashing on the world. Fenn was born in Texas in 1930. He became a fighter pilot, flew 328 combat missions in Vietnam, survived being shot down twice. Then he came home. He moved to Santa Fe and became one of the most successful art dealers in the Southwest. He made a lot of money. He collected pre-Columbian artifacts, Native American jewelry, Civil War memorabilia, rare coins. He was, by any measure, a man who had already lived about 6 lives. In 1988, his doctor told him he had kidney cancer. It was terminal, and he might have a year. Forrest Fenn decided that if he was going to die, he was going to do something interesting with it. He took a small bronze chest, about 10-inch square, and filled it with treasure, gold nuggets, ancient coins, pre-Columbian gold frogs and eagles, emeralds and rubies, a jar containing his autobiography, so whoever found it would know who hid it. When it was full, the chest weighed about 42 pounds. Roughly do the math, you can figure that out. His plan, originally, was to take the chest to the Rocky Mountains and die next to it, and let someone find them both. But the cancer went into remission. He lived. And now he had a chest full of treasure and no plan. So in 2010, when he was 79 years old, he hid the chest somewhere in the Rocky Mountains north of Santa Fe. Then he published a memoir called The Thrill of the Chase that contained a 24-line poem with, he said, 9 clues to the chest's location. He expected maybe 1,000 people to look. Well, the internet got word. Everyone went wild. 350,000 people looked for this thing. And that's the ones we know of. The ones that would admit to it. There was and still are websites and people dedicated to looking for this treasure. So let me say that again. 350,000 people over the next decade went into the Rocky Mountains looking for a bronze chest buried by an 85-year-old art dealer based on a poem. They went in summer and winter. They went with their families, and they went alone. A pediatric nurse from Colorado quit her job to search. A man from New Mexico drove the same canyon roads every weekend for 8 years. Online forums sprung up by tens of thousands of members, all arguing about what warm water's halt meant, or whether the home of the brown was a capital B brown or a common noun, or whether the blaze was a rock formation or a tree scar or the setting sun. 5 people died searching. A 52-year-old man fell into the Arkansas River. A 31-year-old fell from a cliff in Yellowstone. A woman was swept away by a canyon flood. Blech. 2 others died in circumstances that were not fully explained, perhaps by other treasure hunters. Fenn publicly begged people not to search in dangerous conditions. He pled the searchers to be careful. He said the chest was not worth a life. They kept coming. In June 2020, Fenn announced the chest had been found. A medical student and a former journalist named Jack Stuffi, I think I'm pronouncing that right, I don't know, had solved the poem. Jack found the chest in Wyoming near Yellowstone, and then did something that turned the treasure hunting community inside out. He refused to say exactly where. Not the state, he confirmed that. Not the general area, he eventually confirmed that. But the location? No. He said it was Forrest Fenn's secret, and he intended to honor it. Forrest Fenn died 3 months later at age 90. And the thing that happened next is what the episode is really about. Because you would think that would be the end of it. The treasure would be found, the hunt would be over, and people would move on. They didn't. Hundreds of original searchers, people who had spent years and tens of thousands of dollars, couldn't let go. Some beginning disputing that Jack hadn't really found it at all. Others began to reanalyze the poem to find a second chest. They were convinced that Finn had hidden. Others simply kept going to Wyoming to stand in the general area to feel close to the thing they had been chasing. A podcast episode about Finn's treasure was titled "The Treasure Hunt That Broke America." I think that's a little dramatic, but only a little. I want to keep thinking about the line from Finn himself. He said once, "I wonder if the treasure will cause more happiness or more misery." It's a good question. I don't think he ever answered, not even to himself. Now, the next one is about a man who buried 12 treasure boxes and kept no map. And then he died in a car accident. 9 of those boxes are still out there. This is a story about a man who created a perfect puzzle and then took the answer with him to the grave. Brian was a publisher, books, comics, and science fiction. He was creative and eccentric, and he had a wonderful idea in 1982. What if you publish a book that was also a treasure hunt? Not a metaphor, an actual treasure hunt, with actual treasure buried in actual grounds. He painted 12 images. He wrote 12 verses of poetry. He buried 12 ceramic boxes, small boxes, in 12 cities across North America. Each one of them near a location that, if you decode the right image and the right verse pairing, you could find. Each box, if dug up, could be brought to him in exchange for a precious gemstone worth thousands of dollars. The book was called The Secret. You can still buy it. And believe it or not, the publishers of The Secret will still honor the trade-in. It came out in 1982. It sold reasonably well. People tried to solve it. Over the years, 3 boxes were found. One in Chicago in 1983, one in Cleveland in 2004, one in Boston in 2019. The Boston one only recovered. By the way, Discovery Channel crew noticed it was about to be destroyed by a construction crew renovating a park where it was buried at. They dug it up with hours to spare. 9 boxes remain unfound. Now, he died in a car accident in 2005. He kept no map. Now, I want you to feel a specific texture of the situation. 12 buried treasures, 3 found, 9 somewhere underground in American cities, or under buildings that had been built over the top of them, or under parking lots, or in parks that have gone completely redesigned. The only person who knew exactly where they were is gone. The clues exist in the books, but the clues are paintings and poems that were deliberately obscured, parried, and interpreted. They point somewhere, but somewhere in the city is not precise enough to dig. His estate has honored the terms of the hunt. If you find a box, you can still exchange it for a gemstone. The hunt is technically still alive. There are a community of dedicated solvers, online forums, Discord servers, I'm on. People who have spent months on single images, who have made pilgrimages and to their favorite locations and came back empty-handed. Some of them believe they have definitely solved a particular box, but simply can't find the exact spot to dig. Others are sure the boxes have been destroyed or built over, and that the hunt is for the nine a ghost. The Boston recovery is the part I keep coming back to. The box was buried in a park in the North End over 30 years. The park was renovated multiple times. The box was still there, somehow still intact. But it was about to be chewed up by an excavator when the Discovery Channel crew filming an episode of Expedition Unknown that was supposed to be there, that was supposed to be about searching for it, not finding it, actually found it. The camera crew, mid-shoot. The city was days away from destroying it. And no one knew it was there. 9 others may have already been destroyed. Nobody knows. Here's what gets me about Brian. He was a thoughtful man. He clearly cared about the hunt. He designed it with real craft. But he kept no record of the locations. Because one assumes he didn't plan to die at 52. Nobody does. And the puzzle he made has become, in a strange way, about morality. About the things we create that outlast our ability to explain them. The clues are out there. The treasure is out there. But the context, a thing that only Brian knew, the facts that would make the right answers obvious, that's gone. His estate has said carefully that they believe the remaining boxes are still out there in their original locations. They believe they can still be found with the clues in the book. They might be right. One of them might be under your feet. Now, the next story is Confederate gold. He buried it between 2 trees, marked the spot with a knife, sent 7 men back, and they were all captured and hung before they could tell anyone where it was. Colonel John Mosby was, by any fair accounting, one of the most effective guerrilla fighters in the American military history. The Confederacy's Gray Ghost. His unit, the Mosby Rangers, officially the 43rd Battalion, the Virginia Cavaliers, operated behind the Union lines in Northern Virginia with a fluidity, intense, that still gets studied in military academies. He raided supply wagons. He captured Union officers in their bed. He struck at night and dissolved back into the countryside before dawn. The Union Army hated him, so much they offered a $5,000 bounty for his capture, dead or alive. Back then, $5,000 was a lot of money. They never got him. But in March of 1863, he got something. It was a raid on Fairfax County Courthouse, about 15 miles from Washington. and a small party of men slipped through Union lines at night and captured a Union general named Edwin Stockton from his own bed, supposedly by slapping him awake, which he always seemed pleased to tell people about. He took 2 captains, about 30 horses, and in the general's house he found a canvas sack. What was in the sack? The accounts differ slightly depending on who's telling the story. But the general agreement is gold coins, silver candlesticks, jewelry, and bonds. The property of some of the wealthiest families in the Union-occupied parts of Virginia. Valuables that had been confiscated or in some tellings entrusted to the general for safekeeping. The modest estimates values vary, but figures put it at several $1 million. I would say much more. I mean, the bonds would be indispensable. I mean, dependable on where the candlesticks came from. You know, that could have been much older stuff that was made in Virginia. And the gold coins, you know, some of them gold coins from back then are worth 20 and 30,000 a pop. Anyway, his men rode south with the sack, and then someone warned them that the Union cavalry was nearby, cutting off their escape route. So, what Mosby did next is where the legend begins. He stopped, he picked 2 trees, he buried the sack between them, he marked the spot by driving his knife into one of those trees. He told 7 of his men to remember the location. And then he split the group and rode a different way. He sent those 7 men back the next day to retrieve the sack. They were captured before they got there. All 7 were executed. Operating under the policy of a reciprocal execution, he ordered a retaliatory hanging of 7 Union prisoners, an incident that became known as the Front Royal Execution, and which haunted both sides for the rest of the war. But in all this grief and recrimination and military chaos that followed, one thing was lost: the location of the sack. He survived the war. He lived until 1916. He became a lawyer. He even worked for the Republican Party, which scandalized former Confederates who felt he sold out. And the question of the buried sack followed him the rest of his life. Did he ever go back for it? Accounts are conflicted. His own statements are conflicted. In some versions, he says he went back and couldn't find the right trees. In others, he says he considers the location to be lost. In at least one account, he says he never went back because the gold didn't belong to him. The gold didn't belong to him. A Confederate raider, offering outside any conventional law of war, who stole it from a Union-occupied house, is drawing a line about ownership. The area believed to be the burial site is somewhere in, I've never had to say that out loud, Fauquier County, Virginia, between Warrenton and Culpeper. It's a farm country and forest. People have been looking for it since the 1860s. People with metal detectors still work the fields. Historians still argue about which trees, which roads, and which night. The knife mark on the tree rotted away 140 years ago. The trees themselves are gone, but the ground is still there. You kind of wonder what that might, if that's out there hanging around loosely somewhere, and if it was even in Culpeper. But now, this one's about Dillinger. The FBI raided the lodge. Dillinger escaped through a window, and he left behind a suitcase. The FBI's own files are incomplete about what was in it. Of course, the FBI wouldn't lie to us. My computer keeps going on and off. All right. Let me tell you about the single most embarrassing night in the early history of the FBI. April 22nd, 1931. The Little Bohemian Lodge in Wisconsin. A remote lakeside resort in the Northwoods. John Dillinger and his gang had been holed up there for 3 days. They were the most wanted men in America. Dillinger had escaped from jail twice. He robbed somewhere between 15 and 20 banks. John Edgar Hoover had made catching him a personal obsession. He had recently given the FBI, which was called the Division of Investigation at the time, and whose agents still weren't federally authorized to make arrests in any case, expanded powers specifically to go after Dillinger. Someone at the lodge made a phone call, and the feds moved in. Here's what happened. The FBI surrounded the lodge. It was dark and cold. Agents saw 3 men leaving and opening fire because they assumed the men leaving were Dillinger's gang. There were 3 local civilians. A worker named Eugene was killed. The other 2 were badly wounded. One of them was an off-duty police officer. While the FBI was shooting innocent men in a parking lot, Dillinger, along with Babyface Nelson and the rest of his gang, climbed out back windows of a lodge and escaped into the dark Wisconsin woods. Babyface Nelson killed an FBI agent and a police officer during the escape. The FBI held the lodge. They arrested 3 women who had been left behind. They had nothing else. It was a horrible time for the FBI at the time, let's put it that way. In the chaos of the escape, Dillinger left things behind. Clothes, weapons, a car, and a suitcase. Our interest is the suitcase. Now, the official FBI account of the Little Bohemian Raid has been reviewed by historians many times. And there is a consistent and strange gap. The contents of that suitcase are not fully accounted for in public record. The items logged from the lodge don't add up to everything that should have been there based on known criminal proceeds from the Dillinger's gang, the things they had accumulated in the preceding months. Now, this was stuff they couldn't take with him. I mean, not easily. The local oral tradition passed down through the families who lived there in 1934 and whose descendants still live there say this. Dillinger had cash with him, a lot of it. And on his way out the back window, in the dark, in the woods, he buried it. Where? Somewhere on the grounds of the lodge, somewhere in the surrounding forest, somewhere near the lake. The little Bohemian Lodge still exists. It's a bar and restaurant now. And I'd almost want to go there right now. They have a Dillinger room. His pictures and stuff all over the walls, and they'll tell you the story if you asked. People with metal detectors have worked the grounds for decades. The current owners have said, with diplomacy, they suggest they have been asked this question many times, and they are aware of the legend. The paranoid version of the story, and it is, I acknowledge, the paranoid version, is the FBI found the suitcase's real contents that night and kept what was there. It wouldn't be the first time a government agency found criminal money and moved it quietly. The incomplete records are consistent with that. They are also consistent with sloppy record keeping in the chaos of a botched raid. I'm not telling you which to believe. I'm just telling you the records are incomplete. The FBI's own files. That's what I'm saying. Now this one is an interesting story. This one is literally unhinged. It moves a little slower. More like true crime. I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to take a smoke break now and come back. I think I'm going to take a smoke break. I won't be gone long, guys. Grab you a drink. Grab you a smoke if you got them. And I will be right back. I promise. Normally this is one tuck covers for me.
Yes, love. Hang on, baby, I'm looking. Where'd you say it was? Thank you. Anything else? All right.
All right, I'm back. Sorry. I had to have a cigarette. Oh, get comfortable again. I think my mouth is dry from the antihistamines and stuff I've been taking. That and coffee. I'm not sure. I still got the problem with my arm. And I went to one doctor, and I'm going to go to another doctor the 2nd, I think it is, next month. And hopefully they can kind of figure out what's going on with it. But, yeah, the things make me dry and kind of feel stopped up and everything else. Make me feel like I have cotton mouth. So now we are to the dead casino King Silver. His girlfriend and her boyfriend were convicted of crimes related to stealing his silver. And some people think they didn't get it all. The talking don't really dry it out. I think it's the antihistamines. It's like, ugh. I don't know. I mean, I've been taking like 2 different kinds, and they'll curb the itching, and I'm just tired of sleeping all the time, man. I really am. It makes me feel groggy. I get on here, I feel like I'm out of it. But yeah. Anyway, the guy's name is Ted Minion. He was, by any description, a difficult man to love and a worse man to trust with no money. I like Apple. Anyway. He was born into Las Vegas royalty. His father, Benny Binion, founded the Horseshoe Casino. I think they just tore it down, by the way. The place that invented no limits Texas Hold'em tournaments. That hosted the World Series of Poker, that defined a certain rough-edged, authentic version of Las Vegas, that the corporations have since paved over with marble lobbies and celebrity chiefs and chefs. Ted inherited a piece of all that. He also inherited his father's taste for living hard and his father's enemies and his father's distrust for pretty much everyone. He had a heroin problem that the Nevada Gaming Commission eventually couldn't ignore, and in 1998 they stripped him of his gambling license. He was a 55-year-old, effectively exiled from the only world he had ever known, sitting in a house in Las Vegas with an enormous silver collection, a girlfriend of 20 years younger than him, and a paranoid, certain that people were stealing from him. He was right about the last part. The silver collection was Ted's obsession. Not gold, silver. Millions of dollars in silver coins, silver bars, silver bullion accumulated over a lifetime. Ted was a hard money guy. He didn't trust banks. He didn't trust paper. He trusted things he could hold. He built a vault. Not a safe room in the house. An actual underground vault on his ranch in Nevada, about an hour outside of Las Vegas. A concrete bunker, buried, accessible through a hatch, climate controlled. And he installed his silver collection in it. He was proud of it. He showed people. He talked about it. And then on September 17th, 1998, Ted was found dead in his Las Vegas home. The cause of death was determined to be a lethal combination of heroin and Xanax. His girlfriend, Sandy Murphy, and her friend, Rick Talbish, a man with a long history of fraud and a new intimacy with Sandy that Ted had apparently not been fully aware of, were arrested. Tavash had been caught days after Ted's death trying to evacuate the vault. He had arrived with a crew and heavy equipment and had managed to remove a significant portion of the silver before police stopped him. The trial was extraordinary. Vegas loved it. Sandy Murphy was a young, beautiful, and the jury seemed unsure whether she was or whether they was watching a murder case or a soap opera. The couple was convicted of theft. The murder conviction was more complicated, eventually reduced and partially overturned on appeal. The silver that he had managed to remove was recovered, some of it. And here's where it gets interesting. Ted was famously paranoid. He had been systematically moving and hiding assets for years before his death. He believed, with some justification, that people around him were stealing from him. He talked to several people in the last months of his life about having placed silver, specifically coins, in locations outside of the main vault location. Only he knew. If that's true, it is impossible to verify. Ted is dead. The people he might have told are either dead or have reasons to stay quiet. But in the Nevada desert community around the place he lived, the story persists. Ted buried silver in the desert, not in the vault, somewhere else. Somewhere that his girlfriend and Murphy never found, and that nobody has found since. I don't know if that's true, but I know Ted was the kind of man that would do that. He was paranoid, distrustful, rich, and convinced that everyone around him was against him. And he was right about some of that, which is the saddest part of this whole story. Yeah, I see you guys talking about Windows and stuff in there. You're a Chrome fan or a Chromebook fan? You know there's a new Chrome system, right? It's coming out here in the next little bit. Hey, is the new Chrome system out yet? I can't remember. But yeah, no, we have Chromebooks here we use sometimes, but there's a new Chrome system that's coming out. Not the Flex, but a new version of it, and it's supposed to be like AI. I think so, yeah. I listen to a lot of Judas Priest stuff. Unless you're asking Misty. I'm having some more coffee. Wetting my whistle before we start the next one. This is another unhinged one. All right. The Lost Cabin Mine. 2 men found it, and both died very weird. The first man who claimed to have found it died before he could tell anyone where it was. So did the second. This keeps happening. I have been thinking over the course of writing these stories about what all of these stories have in common. And I keep coming back to the same thing. Who found what they were looking for and who couldn't hold on to it, couldn't share it, died before they could say any words. It's a pattern. It's probably a coincidence. The kind of coincidence that turns people paranoid. The Lost Cabin Mine is the purest vision of this pattern I have ever come across. The story begins in the Bighorn Mountains of Wyoming, sometime in 1860. A group of German prospectors, according to the earliest versions of the legend, I should note, found a gold mine of staggering richness in a canyon somewhere in the Bighorns. They built a cabin near the entrance. Then they were attacked by Indians, warriors. In most tellings, almost all of them were killed, but one man survived, made it out of the mountains, and then died shortly after reaching civilization. He left a rough map and a description of the location. The map has been lost. The description has survived in fragments, passed from hand to hand for 160 years. With this story, here's what I want to focus on. It's not the original legend. Gold mine legends from 1860 are a dime a dozen in Wyoming. What I want to focus on is the 20th century and the two men who found it. Or claim they have found it. The distinction matters. And also increasingly doesn't. The first man came in the early decades of the 1900s. He was an experienced prospector. He had been working in the Bighorns for years. By multiple accounts from people who knew him, he came down from the mountains one autumn in a state where he could barely contain his excitement. I mean, I would be like him if I had found a massive trove of gold and everything else. Can you imagine, like, you being out there and you prospecting and you stumbling onto this and finding? Yeah, I mean, I just don't know, especially now with the amount gold is. I mean, it's a feeling that you couldn't comprehend. You knew you'd be rich, and you knew people would be after you, but you want to tell somebody. I guess kind of like winning the lottery, in a way. But anyway, he told people he had found the cabin. He told people he had located the shaft. And he said he was going back in spring. He died that winter. The exact circumstances are recorded in county records as natural causes. And he was not old. He left no documentation of the location. Whatever he knew died with him. Now, I want to add the story here. The woman that was taking care of him as he was dying, he paid her in gold. Just throw it out there. The second man came several decades later. An experienced, also credible to people that knew him. also came down from the bighorn with that look a prospector gets when they see something. He died the next season, all of a sudden, also without leaving a map. Historians have compiled these accounts and described both deaths carefully as occurring in extreme, bizarre circumstances. He does not speculate further, and neither will I. What I will say is this. The Lost Cabin Mine is not the most valuable lost treasure in America. If the Bill Hoard exists, then it's worth more. The Lost Dutchman Mine, if it exists, it's worth more. The Finn chest, when it was found, turned out to be worth less than people imagine. But the Lost Cabin Mine is the most, I don't know the word to say. It has every element. The original tragedy, the survival story, the lost map, the centuries of searchers that couldn't find it. And it has those two men, the ones who found it. And then, in the language that historians use when they don't want to say what they're thinking out loud, died in extremely bizarre circumstances. Before they could tell anyone what they had seen. Now, if you go back to the record of people who have passed away here recently, scientists, UFO people, and, well, even people who've done podcasts and TV shows, there would be some people that would say they had died in extremely bizarre circumstances. Now, I'm not saying someone killed these men. I'm not saying the mine is cursed. I don't believe in curses. Well, sometimes I do. I believe someone can will something to happen. Someone can make things happen. Someone can be the mechanics to the machine, the power that operates everything and pushes things along. Which we can actually talk about. We don't have time tonight if you guys want to do it. Anyway, I'm saying, what do you do with a pattern like that? What does it mean that the same story, the same shape keeps reoccurring? Man finds mine, man dies, map gone, repeat. Scientists go missing, scientists die, scientists go missing, repeat. Over the course of this set of stories, I have sat with people who have devoted years, sometimes decades of their life to these hunts. I have met people who seem perfectly sane until you get them on the subject of a particular cipher, a certain map, or a particular stretch of mountain. And then something shifts. Their eyes go elsewhere. Their voice changes. And they're no longer talking to you anymore. They're talking to the thing, the gold, the treasure, the silver. This is the drive. I don't think they're crazy. I think they found something that most of us never find, which is a question so big it can hold a life. The gold matters. The gold is real. But the gold is also very often not really the point. The point is that America is a country built on the idea there's always more. More land, more gold, more opportunity, more frontiers. just past the next ridge. I'm laughing. Yep. You had me lose my train of thought here. Okay. We were sold a story from the beginning, and we never quite stopped believing it. And somewhere in the Bighorn Mountains of Wyoming, or in the superstitious mountains of Arizona, or in the ground under a Virginia cornfield somewhere, or in the park of a North American city that hasn't been dug up yet, there are things that are actually there. Real gold, real silver, real boxes with real gem certificates inside, waiting. That's the thing about this country. Sometimes the paranoid ones are right. And that is all of our little jolt down treasure hunting lane. We might revisit this one day later. Like I said, I really like the treasure hunting stories and lost treasures. And I mean, there is enough of them to fill a library full of them, guys. You know, there's one I'm sure all of you guys know, Oak Island and things like that. That one has a wild history. A lot of people know about it. But now, you probably haven't heard the latest. And I am going to shift or pivot to some very weird stuff. That's true. What do you guys know about the digital ID? Since we're talking about money. King Charles. I'm going to throw it up on the screen here. I got to move my... Well, come on. There we go. This man right here. I don't want it either, but I think this is what's going to start rolling in. As I was working on this other story, I worked on part of this, the gold thing and whatnot last night, and then I kind of like, when I got up this morning, I did the hantavirus update a little bit, and I was like, well, I want to see if there's anything else going on, and then I stumbled onto this. Now, normally what happens in Britain begins to happen here, it seems like. Anyway, this is a real short clip. I'll go ahead and play it.
My ministers will also proceed with the introduction of digital ID that will modernize how citizens interact with public services.
So, that is official from on the UK standpoint. And I mean, if they have a digital ID, then that means America and other countries will need to have a digital ID to interact and work with them. So that's the thing that we need to really think about here. There's a lot of people who think that the digital ID and the new monetary system is like the mark of the beast or whatever. Me, I personally don't know. I do know that this is probably bad. It is probably real bad. We are starting to see crazier and crazier things happen. And one of the other things that I do want to bring up, just bear with me on this one. I got to make sure nothing else pops up that's not supposed to. All right, I go here again. Now, this right here, this is breaking. This I found this out last night, right before I was going to sleep. I had this on my mind when I was sleeping, or trying to sleep. This chip generates power from quantum vacuum fluctuations. Now, the group says they have working models. It's called microspark, and it can generate power from nothing. But we all know it has to come from somewhere. It's coming from within the quantum vacuum. This means it's coming from another dimension. This means all the stuff they were talking about at CERN was right. All the stuff that they were talking about at Google was right. Now, I hadn't really put this together in a story yet, but I have been working on it. It's been on my mind, and maybe I can kind of like flesh it out here. But there was a scientist in 2009, the director of research and scientific computing at CERN, and he said in a White House briefing and in a CERN HQ briefing, this was his statement: out of this door might come something, or we might send something through it. He claims that if the LHC is operating at full power, that they will be able to open a door for a very tiny lapse of time, tens of seconds. Now, if something is interdimensional, then that means that thing will have plenty of time to come through. For us, it would be no practical use. But for whatever is over there, it would be. Now, there was a woman that come up in my research. Her name is Lisa Randall. Lisa Randall was one of the physicists and girls over on Epstein Island. I'm not going to talk anymore about that part, but I'm going to talk about her a little bit. She believed that there's a core idea called the brain world or brand world scenario. It's a concept that our four-dimensional space-time is embedded into a higher dimension space called the bulk, B-U-L-K. Think of it like this. Our universe is a 3D membrane, similar to a sheet of 2D paper floating in a room. And at a higher dimension may exist around us, but the bulk is like the room holding the paper. And she doesn't say what's on the other side. She just says it's a warped extra dimension, extra large dimensions that might contain one membrane or two membranes or more. When we asked her what leaks through, it was about gravity. She said gravity leaks through. And that gave me pause a little bit. If gravity is leaking through, then that means whatever's over there must have gravity in that dimension. Then that means there must be a solar system. That must be a planet. There must be other things that are causing gravity. Gravity is transferable. Energy is transferable. So that has to be coming from somewhere. Now, that CERN scientist pointed to her book. And they believe that this is the door that he is referring to. But she won't answer it anymore. I do know they were trying to figure it out. It could be another universe. It could be a whole lot of dark matter or energy. But some people, because of the gravity, think it might be a black hole. And here's why. That microchip I was talking about that pulls power from the void, so to say. It was founded by a former DARPA-funded NASA warp drive pioneer. He went into stealth mode and then announced this chip. And he said he had working prototypes. He used the words microscale geometries to capture free energy. Free energy. Free energy is the word that conspiracy theorists and people have been bouncing around like crazy for the past 60, 70 years. Free energy. What the Nazis were doing. What is supposed to be operating and running these spacecraft that we keep seeing. Now, this thing, they're planning on using it in people. They're going to put it for tire pressure sensors, medical implants, and wearables. They're going to put a machine that possibly draws its power from a black hole in your chest to operate your heart. A lot of us will not think that about these things, but, we're going to have this tech out here. We're going to have this tech operating. And this thing, if it does what they say, is harvesting power from quantum vacuum fields. I mean, this power is coming from somewhere. They say it's coming from somewhere. Free energy is not free. I know everything is free, but free energy is not free. I mean, you have to make something to create. This energy is coming from somewhere. This energy, they say, is coming from another dimension. It's coming from another place. It's either coming from a black hole or it's coming from another world. Or we're harvesting energy off of beings. Oh God, I hope we're not. Something like this could be like an act of war. I mean, I'm speculating there, but I mean, I'm just saying but there's a physicist that goes up and he's basically supporting what I'm saying. He says you cannot extract energy directly from a vacuum because there is nothing to give. So this energy is coming from somewhere. I don't know. But the whole idea, the whole concept of a device that can get free energy from a vacuum is scary. Now Google, since we're talking about quantum vacuums, and I really want you to think about this because this has to do with Tesla, Nikola Tesla. And I talked about this before. they fired up Willow. Willow is a supercomputer, a super quantum computer. In order for the chips to run, it has to be within a quantum vacuum that is cold below absolute zero. So, I mean, it's super cold in there. Can't be any sound, there can't be any vibration, there can't be anything like that. Well, the lead researcher of this project, they noticed something bizarre. They started to receive frequencies and codes from within inside the chamber. Something was trying to communicate with the Google's quantum chip. Something was over there trying to talk to it. And this guy, some of the smartest people in the room were there working on this. We're talking about this. They were trying to find interpretations. One guy said quantum computing does not occur in many parallel universes. It does not occur in any parallel universe. It does not demonstrate or even hint of the idea that we live in a multiverse. However, the entire Google quantum team explicitly said over and over again that the computations must be happening somewhere other than here. Somewhere other than here. Not on Earth, not in our realm, not in our reality, but somewhere else. So this machine is calculating and running because it's running so fast. It has to operate outside of our reality. This Willow chip, and they're building another one too. They're even talking about incorporating these quantum systems within CERN and some of the bigger places. That donut thing that creates the power of the sun. So they're going to incorporate these things in that. These quantum computers are going to start running quantum AI. So that means if there is something else out there, that means if these quantum AI computers are operating outside of our reality, not here, then something over there could bond or become part of that code. That means that can come over here. That's when we really need to worry about AI. That's when we really need to worry about AI. When whatever is over there injects its code into ours. That's when we move beyond the simulation. That's when we move to a point where I think we will have to really worry about computers. Good night. I'll see you later. I'll probably be on tomorrow. I'm getting ready to pack it in. I'm 30 minutes over anyway. But anyway, like I said, I hadn't fully fleshed the whole thing out into a story yet. But I had been working on it, and that is not as far, but for the most part, as far as I've gotten on it. But anyway, I hope everyone had a good night tonight. I will probably either be on later or I will be on in the morning, like normal. I mean, here lately I've been getting up, doing 20 or 30 minutes, and then going back off to doing the night show. I'm erratic, especially if I got everything taken care of and I can get everything done. But anyway, thank you again for coming. Thank you again for staying with me. And thank you again for listening to the old man rant. Stay paranoid, my friends, and God bless.